As the cold December air of 1988 quietly settled over the streets of San Francisco's Castro neighborhood, one of the world's most dazzling disco stars was taking his final breaths in a hospital room. Sylvester James Jr. was only 41 years old. The man who made millions dance with his sequin costumes, feathered hats and falsetto voice could no longer even get out of bed. But even at death's door, he remained in control. A single sentence he wrote in his will stayed hidden for 35 years, until his mother Letha opened that envelope. When she read that sentence, the woman dropped to her knees and cried so hard that everyone at the funeral service froze. What did that sentence say? And why did Sylvester forbid his favorite song from being played at his funeral? These questions don't just open the door to a death story. They also reveal a mother's broken heart, the dirty secrets of the music industry, and how a man became a legend during the darkest days of the AIDS crisis. But first, let me tell you this. If you listen to this story all the way through, you'll learn about a second secret Sylvester hid in his will. That secret is still saving lives today. And before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications, because we keep sharing real-life dramas like Sylvester's story that you rarely hear about. To understand Sylvester's death, you first need to understand how he lived, because this man lived every moment of his life by his own rules, and that courage both made him a legend and destroyed him. Born in Los Angeles in 1947, when Sylvester started singing gospel music at age 3, nobody thought he'd go this far. When he sang in the Pentecostal church choir, people cried. His voice was so powerful and emotional that even the preacher said, "This child has God's hand on him." But the church leaders didn't take long to notice something. Sylvester wasn't normal. He hung out with the girls, played their games, and moved his body with feminine gestures when he danced. By the time he was 13, the preacher called his mother Letha over. "Your son is under the devil's influence," he said. "We have to expel him from the church. If he doesn't change, God will not have mercy on him." When Letha came home that day, she looked at her son, and the words she spoke changed Sylvester's life forever. "You can't come to church anymore. God doesn't accept you this way. Neither do I." For a 13-year-old child, these words were a death sentence. Sylvester cried in his room until morning that night. But the next day, he made a decision. If the church didn't want him, he didn't want the church. If his mother didn't accept him, he wouldn't forgive his mother. And from that day on, he didn't speak to his mother for 17 years. 17 years! Can you imagine? They lived in the same city for 17 years, but never met. Letha didn't know where her son was, and when Sylvester thought of his mother, the anger inside him kept rising. That night, after his mother's words, Sylvester did something he'd never done before. He stood in front of the mirror in his tiny room and stared at himself. Who was he? The church said he was possessed by the devil. His mother said God didn't accept him. But when he looked in the mirror, he didn't see a demon. He saw a boy who loved music, a boy who felt most alive when he sang, a boy who didn't understand why loving beauty, grace, and color was wrong. He made a promise to himself that night, a promise that would define his entire life. "I will never pretend to be someone I'm not, even if it costs me everything." And it did cost him everything. His mother, his church, his home. But it also gave him everything. His truth, his voice, his legacy. But that anger didn't stop him. In fact, it empowered him. At 15, he started going to Los Angeles' gay clubs. At 17, he formed a drag group called Disquotes. At 19, he wore a blue chiffon dress to his high school graduation and received his diploma. The principal said, "This is unacceptable," but Sylvester didn't care. He wasn't going to live by society's rules anymore. He was going to create his own rules. In 1970, he moved to San Francisco and joined the Coquettes, a revolutionary drag troupe. But Sylvester wanted more than just performance art. He wanted to be a serious musician. In 1972, he left the group and formed Sylvester and his hot band. He made his first albums, but success didn't come. Record companies found him too weird. Radio stations didn't play his songs. Sylvester was almost ready to give up. Before Fantasy Records, Sylvester had almost given up. He was working odd jobs, sleeping on friends' couches, wondering if his dream was just delusion. One night in 1976, he performed at a small club in the Castro, maybe 30 people in the audience. But when he hit that first high note, something happened. The room fell silent, and when he finished, a woman in the back stood up and screamed, "That's it, that's the sound." That woman introduced him to a producer. That producer introduced him to Fantasy Records. Sometimes your entire life can change because one person believed in you when nobody else did. Fantasy Records signed him in 1977 with backing vocalists Martha Wash and Azora Rhodes. When Step 2 dropped in 1978, "You Make Me Feel Mighty Real" made him a superstar overnight. World tours, city keys, millions of fans. But behind the scenes, betrayal was brewing. Fantasy Records had promised to make Sylvester a millionaire. Step 2 went gold. It sold millions of copies. Do you know how much money went into Sylvester's pocket? Only $20,000. Yet Fantasy Records owed him $218,112.50. Sylvester met with the company. "Where's my money?" he asked. The company showed him accounting records and said costs were deducted. Production, marketing, distribution. Everything was shown as a deduction. Sylvester hired a lawyer and went to court with Harvey Fuqua. A 3-year legal battle began. The result? Loss. The court ruled in favor of Fantasy Records. Sylvester had to settle for only $20,000. This incident deeply wounded him. Because he had trusted the music industry, he thought they valued him. But the truth was out there. They had only used him for white, heterosexual producers. Sylvester was just a commodity, a money machine. And when his useful life was over, he would be cast aside. But the real devastation would come from somewhere else. And this devastation would hit not just Sylvester, but an entire generation. The last time Sylvester and Patrick worked together in the studio, something felt different. It was late 1981. They were recording what would become their final collaboration. Patrick sat at the synthesizer, his fingers dancing across the keys, creating those electronic sounds that defined their music. Sylvester stood at the microphone, headphones on, eyes closed. Between takes, Patrick said something that Sylvester would never forget. "You know what I love about your voice? It doesn't apologize. It doesn't ask permission. It just exists. Loud and proud and unapologetic." Sylvester laughed. "That's because you taught me that music isn't about fitting in. It's about standing out." Patrick smiled, but his smile seemed tired, sad, like he knew something Sylvester didn't yet know. 3 months later, Patrick was in the hospital. 6 months later, he was gone. That studio session was their goodbye. Neither of them knew it at the time. But the music they made that night, it carried all the love, all the fear, all the unspoken words between them. In 1982, Patrick Cowley died at 32, AIDS. When Sylvester visited him in the hospital, Patrick was unrecognizable. "Finish the album for me," Patrick whispered. 2 weeks later, he was gone. At the funeral, Sylvester's voice broke. "He was my soulmate. He didn't know he'd follow in 5 years." After Patrick's death, San Francisco's gay community lived in terror. Every week, another friend disappeared. And Sylvester had one fear too. Was he sick too? Until 1987, he avoided asking himself this question. But that year, everything changed. By 1987, he was coughing constantly. Doctors said bronchitis. But it wasn't. Fever, night sweats, numb legs, neuropathy. His friend Sharon forced him to get tested. A week later, the envelope arrived. HIV positive. Already AIDS. The doctor's voice was flat. "I'm sorry. There's little we can do." Do you know what Sylvester felt at that moment? Not anger. Not fear. A strange acceptance. because dozens of his friends around him had already died. Patrick was gone. Others were gone. His turn had come. And perhaps most painfully, his lover Rick Cranmer had the same disease. Rick Cranmer was his last love. When Sylvester announced their relationship on Joan Rivers' show in 1987, millions watched. Rick's family learned their son was gay on live TV. His father never spoke to him again. 6 months later, Rick died. AIDS complications. Sylvester gave a speech at the funeral, but no words came out. He just cried. As Rick's coffin was lowered into the ground, he thought to himself, "Soon I'll be here too." And he was right. The year 1988 was torture for Sylvester. His body was abandoning him. He had loss of sensation in his legs. The neuropathy disease was progressing. When he took the stage, he had difficulty standing, but he didn't cancel his shows, because the stage was life for him. As long as he was on stage, he felt alive. In November, he appeared one last time at the Castro Street Fair. Thousands of people chanted Sylvester, Sylvester for him. Sylvester couldn't go on stage but waved to the crowd. People were crying, because everyone knew this was a farewell moment. Weeks later, Dreamland nightclub. His final performance. Backstage, he told Sharon, "Baby, I don't feel good. Don't get too close." She begged him to cancel. He refused. "My fans are waiting." On stage, his falsetto cracked, breath failed. But he finished. Standing ovation. He turned back once. Goodbye. He never took the stage again. The neuropathy started in his feet. At first just a tingling sensation, then numbness, then pain. Sharp, shooting pain that made him gasp in the middle of performances. He started wearing looser shoes on stage, then he started holding onto the microphone stand for balance. Then he couldn't walk without assistance. One night Sharon found him in his dressing room, crying, not because of the pain, but because he knew what it meant. The disease was progressing. His body was shutting down. His body was shutting down. And there was nothing he could do to stop it. "How much time do I have?" he asked Sharon. She didn't answer. She just held him. And they both cried. December. Hospitalized. Pneumocystis pneumonia. Lungs filled with fluid. 5 weeks of visitors. He told them all, "Don't be sad. I lived. Really lived." One day alone he called his lawyer. Final additions to the will. No one knew what. Yet, on the morning of December 16th, 1988, at 7 o'clock, Sylvester James Jr. took his last breath. His mother Letha was by his side. Sylvester's last words were these, "Mama, I'm going home. Tell them I'm going home." Letha held her son's hand and cried. This woman who hadn't spoken to her son for 17 years was now witnessing his death, and the regret inside her was so great that she was almost going insane. The news of Sylvester's death shook San Francisco. In the Castro neighborhood, people poured into the streets. They lit candles. They sang his songs. Sylvester wasn't just a singer, he was a symbol who never hid his identity, resisted society's pressures, and inspired everyone with his courage. And now that symbol was gone. A week later, the funeral. The lawyer found Sylvester's list of wishes. First, don't play Touch Somebody's Life. It makes me cry. I want them to dance, not mourn. Second, everyone wears colors. Black forbidden. A celebration, not a funeral. The third item would bring tears to everyone's eyes. I'm donating all my music rights to AIDS relief organizations. Even while dying, Sylvester had thought of others. The income from You Make Me Feel Mighty Real, Dance Disco Heat, and all his other songs would now go to fighting AIDS. Every radio play, every album sale, every streaming income, all would save lives. But there was one more thing in the will. The lawyer had added an envelope at the very end. It said, "To my mother" on the envelope. The lawyer didn't open that envelope, because it belonged only to Letha. Funeral day. Castro church packed. Everyone in colors. Purple capes, pink suits, feathered hats, a rainbow explosion. Sylvester's coffin centered, covered in flowers. Martha and Izora sang, tears streaming, voices strong. Harvey Milk's friend spoke of his Castro legacy. Then the lawyer took the stage. He had that envelope in his hand. Before Sylvester died, he left a letter to his mother. He said, "Letha will now read this letter." Letha stood up. Her hands were trembling. She took the envelope from the lawyer and slowly opened it. She pulled out a piece of paper from inside. There were only a few lines of writing on the paper. When Letha began to read, her voice trembled. "Mama, I made it. Thank you for finally seeing me. I forgive you, and I hope you forgive yourself. All I ever wanted was for you to love me as I am, and in the end you did. That's all that matters. I love you. Your son Sylvester." After Letha read those sentences, she pressed the paper to her chest and began to cry. Everyone in the church was crying, because those words carried a message not just to a mother but to everyone. Sylvester had fought his whole life. He had battled to be accepted, and in the end he had won. But the story doesn't end here, because after Letha read that letter, she said something else, and what she said still affects people today. Letha spoke, voice trembling. "My son taught me love must be unconditional. I loved him with conditions for years. He didn't need to change. I did. When he invited me to his 1979 concert, I almost didn't go. But I went. I saw him truly for the first time, an artist, loved by thousands. I had rejected him. Backstage I said, 'Forgive me.' He said, 'I already forgave you, Mama.' That was my son." What Letha didn't tell the congregation that day was what happened after that 1979 concert. When she went backstage, Sylvester didn't recognize her at first. 17 years had passed. She had aged. Her hair was gray. Her face was lined with regret. When he finally realized it was her, he froze. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The air was thick with all the years of silence, all the hurt, all the words left unsaid. Then Letha did something she should have done 17 years earlier. She got down on her knees and said, "I'm sorry. I was wrong. You are my son. And I love you. Please forgive me." Sylvester pulled her up and hugged her. And for the first time since he was 13 years old, he felt like he had a mother again. Letha sat down, and something happened in the church. Someone started applauding. Then someone else. And soon the entire church was giving a standing ovation, because this wasn't just a funeral. This was a celebration. A celebration of Sylvester's life. A celebration of his courage. A celebration of his love. But there was one more secret in Sylvester's will, and that secret would come out years later. 2005, 17 years later, his lawyer held a press conference. $3 million from Sylvester's music rights, all to AIDS organizations, thousands treated, medications distributed, research funded. One more clause: if a cure is found, 50% goes to poor patients. He'd planned for a future he'd never see. When this announcement was made, the journalists in the hall applauded, because Sylvester's legacy was now much clearer. He wasn't just a singer, he was a visionary. He had used even his own death as an opportunity, continuing to give hope to people even after his death. And today, in 2025, Sylvester's songs are still being listened to. "You Make Me Feel Mighty Real" plays at every Pride March. Every new generation discovers him. And with every listen, money goes to AIDS foundations. But perhaps the most important legacy is this: Sylvester showed us that true courage is loving yourself as you are. He didn't hide his identity despite society's pressures. Even when the music industry exploited him, he kept singing. Even when AIDS brought him down, he took the stage. And even while dying, he thought of others. Now it's time to tell you the second secret in the will. Because that letter he wrote to his mother Letha wasn't the only special part of the will. There was another letter. To Patrick, written in 1982, never sent. "Bury it with me," his will said. The lawyer read it first. "Patrick, you understood me. My music, my soul, my fears. One day I'll come too. We'll make music again. If heaven has a studio, meet me there. I love you." The world saw a superstar, Inside he was alone, but he still kept singing, because music was life for him. Music was the only thing that made him forget his pain. Music was the only place he could express himself. Today in Castro, a plaque on Rainbow Honor Walk. Sylvester James Jr., 1947 to 1988, Queen of Disco, LGBTQ hero, never forgotten. 2019, Library of Congress added Mighty Real to National Registry. 2023, Rolling Stone's Top 200 Singers, number 169. He fought for years, rejected, ostracized, exploited, never gave up. The world finally saw him. That sentence in his will still affects me. Mama, I made it. Thank you for finally seeing me. Because sometimes the greatest victory in life is getting your loved ones to see you. Sylvester waited 17 years. He lived away from his mother for 17 years. But in the end, mother and son found each other. And that moment for Sylvester was a moment that made him forget all his pain. Today, Sylvester's music plays not just at pride marches, but at weddings, parties, and on the radio. Every song that plays reminds us of his story, a story of courage, resistance, and love. And with every listen, the money going to AIDS foundations continues to save lives. Sylvester has been dead for 37 years, but he's still saving lives, still giving hope, still telling people you are worthy, you are special, you deserve to be loved. That's Sylvester's true legacy. He wasn't just a disco star, he was a revolutionary who broke social norms, transcended gender boundaries, and proudly carried his identity, and his courage inspires millions of people today. If you can openly live as gay today, if you can proudly carry your identity, if you can be yourself, one reason for that is the struggle of people like Sylvester. They paved the way, they paid the price, they showed courage, and we benefit from that courage today. Later, Letha told a journalist, "He taught me love must be unconditional. I loved him with conditions. He didn't need to change. I did. It's never too late. He taught me to forgive." How many parents still don't accept their children? How many hide their identity? How many are crushed by society? Sylvester's story shows us this true freedom is accepting yourself as you are, not waiting for others' approval, carving your own path, and Sylvester did exactly that. He was fired from McDonald's because he refused to wear a hairnet. He was expelled from church because he didn't hide himself. He was exploited by record companies, but kept singing. AIDS brought him down, but he took the stage, and even while dying, he thought of others. That's why Sylvester is a legend, because he didn't just sing. He gave a message: you are enough, you are worthy, you deserve to be loved, and no one can determine your worth. Only you can determine it. And that last sentence in his will is the essence of this message. Mama, I made it. Thank you for finally seeing me. Sylvester made it. His mother saw him. The world saw him. And today, 37 years later, we still see him. In his music, in his courage, in his legacy. Every time You Make Me Feel Mighty Real plays, Sylvester returns to us. Every time a pride flag waves, his spirit is there. Every time someone proudly carries their identity, Sylvester's courage echoes. Because Sylvester showed us death is not an end, but a transformation. He may be gone physically, but his spirit, his music, his message will live forever. And if you feel alone today, if you think you're not accepted, if you feel worthless, listen to Sylvester's songs, read his story, and remember you too are mighty real. You too are real. You too are worthy. That sentence hidden in Sylvester's will was written for all of us. I made it. You finally saw me. And that's enough. Yes, enough. Because being seen, being accepted, being loved, isn't that what life is all about? Sylvester James Jr. was September 6, 1947 to December 16, 1988. A short life of 41 years. But what an impact. What a legacy. What courage. And today when we hear his voice, we still dance. We still sing. We still remember. Because Sylvester will never be forgotten. He will remain mighty real forever. Now I want to ask you something personal. Sylvester waited 17 years for his mother to see him. 17 years of silence. How long have you waited for someone to accept you? A parent? A friend? Someone you loved? Tell me in the comments. I'm reading every single one. And here's what I really want to know. What would your final letter say? If you had one last message for the world, what would it be? Sylvester's was, "Mama, I made it. Thank you for finally seeing me." What would yours be? Write it below. Because here's the truth. We all want to be seen. We all want to matter. We all want someone to say, "I see you, and you're enough." So tell me, which moment in this story hit you hardest? Was it the 17 years of silence? Patrick's death? That final letter? The $3 million saving lives? Drop a timestamp in the comments and tell me what made you feel something real. If this story moved you, do two things. First, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Someone waiting to be seen. Someone afraid to be themselves. Second, subscribe and turn on notifications, because next week I'm telling you about another legend who changed the world but died too young. But right now I need to hear from you. Comment below. What's your "I made it" moment? When did someone finally see the real you? Or are you still waiting? Let's fill this comment section with stories of courage and acceptance. Let's create the space Sylvester fought for, where everyone is seen, everyone is heard, everyone is mighty real. Drop your story below. I'm listening.